The views and opinions expressed on this show belong solely to the hosts and their guests and do not reflect the views of any on-site institutions unless explicitly stated.
What's up, everybody? My name is Steve Vanderwall.
And I'm Justin Klosser.
And we're your hosts of Cannabis Cum Laude, a podcast devoted entirely to cannabis. We're going to talk cultivation, business, medicine, science, politics, advocacy, culture, and everything in between. Because let's face it, the cannabis industry is complicated, it's robust, and it has a ton of moving parts. So it's going to be our job to help you understand it a little bit better. So tune in every Friday morning for a brand new episode. And if you have a question that you'd like to have us answered on one of our shows, email us at questions@cannabiscumlaude.com.
Hello and welcome to another episode of Cannabis Cum Laude. Today we're going to be talking about hydroponics with our good friend and resident hydro guy, Rob Bonfiglio, who is one of the co-founders of #Hydro Inc., the premier hydroponics store in Western New York. He's been cultivating for over 11 years and specializes in hydroponic growing. Welcome to the show, my friend.
What's up, Steve? Justin, thanks for having me, guys.
Absolutely. Welcome on, Rob. Thanks for these shirts, too.
Thanks, no problem.
Oh, yeah,
Just got 'em.
fresh swag
From
the hydro guy. Yeah. What does the back say again?
All we need is more plants.
That's all we need, baby.
right.
With our giving hands, you know? Oh, Justin. Yeah.
Oh, yeah. Love it.
Yes. Yeah.
So if our introduction didn't give it away, we're going to be talking about hydroponics today.
Yes.
Is that something that you know a little bit about?
Just a little bit. I think I scratched the surface.
Good, because I don't really know anything about it, so I'm going to be sitting here with my notepad going to cannabis school.
Yeah.
So what I do know is that there are a few different hydroponic systems, right? There's not just, I grow hydroponics isn't just one system. You know, you have deep water culture, Ebb and Flow, NFT. So I'm kind of hoping that maybe we could start with kind of high level of what deep water culture is, what it entails, maybe some pros and cons.
That's probably one of the biggest beasts of hydro is the deep water culture.
Yeah.
Great when it's great, and you got to be pretty on top of that system specifically because things can go wrong quick. So essentially, you have a main water source underneath, oxygen or air stone in that said water source, and then your plant and roots literally live solely in that water with a little bit of clay, expanded clay pebbles as a growing medium. Most popular deep water system would be RDWC, which is recirculating deep water culture. It just kind of helps keeping everything moving, mixed, and more of a stable pH, as opposed to having multiple, just single, like 5-gallon buckets, you know, which can get quite tedious if you have a bunch of them.
So it's RDWC is like just a big system with a bunch of pots and a big res?
So imagine, for sake of numbers, 8 plants. They're all connected with PVC in a straight line, so 2 rows of 4. There's a main brain bucket that everything gets returned to, which naturally will force the gravity back through those lines, creating a little bit of a current, or just recirculating it. So
So when you run your RDWC, do you still put air stones in there, or do you think that circulation is enough to keep it aerated?
So generally there's about 10 liters of air per bucket, or if they're 8-gallon buckets, the rule of thumb is like 1 liters of air per gallon of water. So you want to have an air stone in each module, and then 1 large air stone in the actual like brain bucket.
Okay.
So you want to use like a really clean salt-based nutrient. Not too many people get into organics when it comes to RDWC for the sake of, potential bad pathogens or bacteria getting in that water. You want to stay more sterile.
Yeah, and you end up with buildup in your pipes and whatnot.
Yeah.
All inside on the inside of your buckets.
Oh, yeah.
You get slimy and
you get
gross.
your roots all dirty, and then you get slime algae and stuff like that. No good.
Yeah.
So how often, from what I understand, do you have to change the water out pretty frequently?
So in the beginning, when the plants are small, you're keeping the water so clean and you're hoping everything stays really sterile. It's quite common or normal for people to run that same water for like 2 weeks at a time, 10 days, somewhere around there. as long as your water stays good, your pH is good, and all your levels or your EC or parts per million, everything seems to be pretty balanced out, you can keep that water going. Some people will actually add fresh water as the water level goes down and lets the food kind of deplete in the system to give the plants a little bit of a break. So
that's kind of more my experiences with DWC is in pools, for lack of a better word, instead of individual buckets, whereas more probably what your home grower is going to gravitate towards.
Exactly.
But in that case, you just keep the water level high. Like it'll slowly go down as the plants are transpiring water out through their leaves, and you just refill that with a mild nutrient solution, and at least that's what we do in my experiences. And it just kind of stays. It's a little bit less than what you would feed in if you were running on like some kind of a cycle. You just, because it's like a constant feed system, so you dial the ppms down a little bit.
Almost half, right?
Yeah.
So most people, let's say they're cultivating mid-bloom, the levels of parts per million, which is the amount of like TDS, parts per million, total dissolved solids or salts. That's essentially how much food is in the water. And if you're running a traditional system, sometimes you get as high as 1,400 parts per million in your water, whereas deep water, you probably top off somewhere around 700-800, 900 being probably the highest I've ever seen. So saves you on food in that sense.
So how much of the roots are actually submerged in the water?
Most of it.
Yeah, so that it varies between some growers. I've always found that the least amount of air or that air gap between, the water and the roots, the better you are. The more air gap you have, I feel like it leaves you a lot more susceptible to problems. Whereas that water is generally pretty sterile. You're running some kind of hypochlorous acid or some kind of H2O2 or hydrogen peroxide to keep the roots clean. If that solution's all the way into the roots, maybe, quarter inch, half inch into the net pot where the plant is, you're probably going to stay better off.
Oh, so you want the water's pretty high level. I thought the water was like, say, here's the roots, here's the water, and there's a space between there.
That's okay. You probably want to...
That's going to be more like an aeroponic type system, and they're going to be misting the roots. And so the roots are still pretty much always going to stay wet. Like you don't really want to let those roots dry out ever completely. That's actually the idea behind like a fabric pot, right? Is that it hits air, and it actually kills and prunes the end of that root and stimulates more branching of the roots. And so that's why you get like a more dense root mass when it comes to like a fabric pot. But like, so you always want to have them wet. And so as far as DWC goes, it's going to be
very minimal.
At least I do have one little DWC little bucket that I run at home that I actually run like a lettuce in. Just, it's fun. And I keep that almost touching the lid of the pot the whole time.
Okay.
Seems to do okay. I might be doing a little bit wrong, I guess.
So the full net pot is submerged.
Yeah.
Okay. I was just wondering if that's what you meant. Yeah.
Why I've heard that you can pull some serious yields and pretty quick with DWC. Why is that right?
It is. I mean, the plants they generally grow a lot larger in a DWC system, which is why you'll see mostly, I mean, I guess on the small home grower level, you'll see 5-gallon buckets and people use totes and stuff like that, put a couple plants in there. But on a larger commercial scale, you'll see 8 or 13 gallon, modules. Each plant has its own 8 to 13 gallons to just go crazy in.
And they get monstrous?
I mean, sometimes at the end of the grow, most people veg in these systems too. So you've got, let's say 4 to 6 weeks in veg, maybe a little longer, and then 8 to 10 or 11 weeks in bloom. And by the time that's done, the whole 8 to 13 gallon module is just a full square of just beautiful roots.
Wow.
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
So theoretically, you could have even bigger res than that, and you could grow Christmas trees.
Does that become a problem with our DWC then? Like where you have roots clogging up the PVC piping?
So sometimes with the 8-gallon modules, they'll use 2-inch PVC. They found that mostly works
Generally
best.
lets it through.
Yeah, but see now, if you're vegging or growing the plant for a long time before you decide to switch it into bloom, you might have some roots that will naturally, they grow with the that little current that goes with it. And sometimes you'll have to, pull the net pot out and actually pull the roots out of the 2-inch PVC.
Do a little pruning
clean, sterile tools. And I think the rule of thumb, you don't want to take no more than 15-20% of the bottom of the roots,
So how often is it a problem that, the first thing that pops into my head when I think of something recirculating is pathogens, right? And if you get one problem, they're all going to get it, right?
Yes.
So like, is this something that's not typically as much of an issue since we're not in soil or soilless mix, or like, I don't know. I guess to me it seems like a lot of risk.
It is, which is why I wouldn't. So when you asked initially, I said it's one of those beasts of hydroponics, because it's not that it does great when it does great, but it's not so sought out, because you really have to have everything in line for success when it comes to RDWC, especially on a little bit of a larger scale. Mm-hmm. Let's say even 8 plants might be a larger scale for some people, and it might be a lot to manage. You're talking about, somewhere between 65 and 70 something gallons worth of mix. You have to be precise with the chemicals you put in. And then, like you said, pathogen. Maybe they leave that air gap too much, and they've got 5 inches of air, and the air quality in the room isn't that great. Mm-hmm. Or the air pumps are in that room. They've got a little inlet on the bottom of the thing with a small filter, but say the air quality is not good. Now you're just direct injecting bad air quality through those air stones, which most of them are like micro pores, and now you're just putting bad air quality right directly into the water, which leaves a lot of room for error.
And another thing that kind of to piggyback off that, feels like pH swing would happen a lot quicker as well.
Yes.
Which could result in catastrophe, right?
Absolutely. And like you said earlier, aquaponics, very fast feedings or very fast results because they're feeding almost all the time. So things can go really wrong really quick, especially in deep water. There's not much of a plate, or what's the word I'm looking for here? You don't have much room.
Not much room for error.
Yeah, not much room for error. You don't have, like with cocoa, say they don't get... No buffer.
There
exactly. If something goes wrong in cocoa, it's fairly easy to correct it. RDWC, things can go so bad so fast, you might not have a chance to correct it.
Okay. So do you think that it would be more risky or less risky than some... okay, so let me ask you this question first. Do you think it's feasible to grow cannabis in an NFT-style hydro?
Absolutely. You're going to be doing more sea of green and on the wall, right? So it'd be more vertical to save spacing, and then you would do aisleways. And, depending on the ceiling height, kind of depends on how many rows or tubes you would do. But absolutely you could. It would just be more of
keep them small.
Keep them small. Don't top them. Just keep them kind of more mainlined, or just a straight, and
have a wall full of quarters.
Pretty much, yeah. Exactly. Just straight top colas. You know what I
mean? The only reason I ask is because I know that they kind of stray away from NFT style growing as far as commercially.
Yeah.
For tomatoes, they stopped doing that because the roots were clogging up the channels.
Yeah, and then tomatoes get huge too,
Yeah, massive.
Yeah, so they're really good for lettuce, herbs, and small greens like that. That seems to be what people most
quick
typically
turnaround.
Do. Oh yeah, especially on a commercial scale.
So what I'm thinking is growing lettuce in there. I can't remember the date now. I feel like I shouldn't have brought that up. But anyway, moving forward. So if we go in, we get a small plant, and then we just flip it. I mean, that 8 weeks, they're probably not gonna fill out that channel, so you might be able to make it through, is what you're saying.
Yeah.
But you could tighten those channels up even, really.
Yeah, and it also depends on the cultivar, the strain, and you know what I mean, like what characteristics they have. So some plants go into bloom, or 12 hours on, 12 hours off, light period, and some will only stretch 6 inches in the first 2 to 3 weeks of bloom. Some will double in height. So, if you flip a 24-inch plant, it might finish at 48 inches. If you don't take all that kind of stuff into effect, your ceiling height, where you should mount your lights, away from the ceiling to, alleviate error or fire hazard. And then most lighting has a recommended distance away from the light itself. So you really have to take everything into effect to make sure you don't have plants that are growing past your lights in any system that you have.
Yeah, for sure.
Especially RDWC, because sometimes things go crazy. It goes really well for you, and then they overgrow your space.
Triple when you flip.
Yeah, right.
Think about that at like a commercial perspective. Like some of these, say you got even a 10,000 square foot room. Like if your plants are growing that fast, and I mean, unless you had all your lights and shit on automation, not only are you gonna have to maintain those plants on a daily basis, but I feel like you're gonna have to regularly adjust your lights.
So on a commercial scale, things are really nice. They have all their lights on like a track with a winch, you know what I mean? With a click of a button, they're all raised and lowered in different quadrants or squares. In those 10,000 square foot facilities, man, the roofs are 15, 20 foot high.
Yeah, they got all day.
Yeah.
Oh, shit.
And they just mount them. They mount them right at the ceiling, and that's like where they stay.
Bzz,
Yep.
Raise the lights by 3 inches.
Yep.
I was trying to set you up there for something.
Let's go.
So we were saying the beast is RDWC.
Yep.
So my impression from having more formally learned academics is that NFT is more risky because of the lack of substrate, right? So like at least in DWC, if your pump breaks, you're still hanging out in water.
Correct. So I guess I could see that on a more commercial scale, which is maybe why people really don't use it for cannabis, and maybe that's why it's more used for vegetable crops and stuff like that. I mean, when you're set up commercially, you would think they have fail safes in place. One pump doesn't turn on, there's a backup. Somewhat with like a business and a generator, you would think that they would have those fail safes.
Anyway.
Yeah. But yeah, that's actually a really good point. I didn't even think about that at first, because it really just depends. The whole system is dependent upon that pumping it to the top row to let gravity do its thing and flow from tube to tube, right?
Yeah.
So yeah, that would be detrimental.
I was just curious your opinion. You have a little bit more practical experience working with these things than I do, so I just obviously valid.
I'd completely overthought that. Yeah, absolutely.
Cool. Yeah. So how exactly does the NFT system work?
So essentially, you have a set number of tubes or rows. Mostly they're in a vertical setting, but I have seen some like horizontal systems. They're pitched slightly. I forget. It really depends on how many feet the tube goes, depends on how many inches it pitches. But essentially, reservoir on the bottom, say 5 tubes on the wall, that reservoir is going to have a pump in it that pumps the water up to the top tube, and naturally along that pitch, they will just go from tube to tube, and the roots that are growing through into those tubes will all get some of the nutrient-rich solution.
I like that vertical on the wall style you're talking, because like gravity almost forces, as long as you're pumping enough water, it's gonna get there.
Absolutely.
And so the system that I used was a horizontal style, and we had, I believe it was a 20 channel system.
Okay.
And each channel I think was 20 plants.
Yep.
And so we had a 55-gallon drum that pumped water into, I think it was like a 4-inch PVC pipe on one end. And that water would run down that pipe through little output hoses into each channel.
Yep.
And honestly, the channel looked flat. Like the pitch wasn't that much. It was pretty close to flat.
Yeah.
And then on the other side is just another 4-inch PVC pipe that channel drained into, which would circulate back into the 55-gallon reservoir.
So essentially, it's like the same pitch as the gutter on your house, right? So
yeah.
Like, when you're standing back, you do see a slight pitch, but it's nothing crazy that the naked eye picks up right away. Just enough for water to flow. You know what I mean? That's all.
Yeah.
Interesting.
They're really cool systems.
But not good for cannabis.
They work fine for cannabis if you know how to use it.
Yeah.
Fair enough.
See, my favorite system's top feed. Always.
Yeah.
I've always been like a top feed guy. When it comes to hydro, I played with the RDWC. I played with aquaponics a little bit. What was the other one we mentioned already? Not NFT.
So by top feed, you mean like in a substrate and watering in on top?
Yeah, so preferred it would be 70-30 now.
Cocoa to perlite.
Cocoa to perlite. I did straight cocoa for a long time. I found that my dry back periods I wasn't getting enough percentage of dry back in the hour span that I wanted to. And a dry back is pretty much you water the plant and how long it takes to dry out before your next feeding. So I have now found that multiple small feeds per day do a lot better than just a couple longer feeds per day, which allows more dry back, which allows the roots to do their job and search for the water. Bigger roots, bigger fruits.
That makes a lot of sense to me.
Steering the plant.
As far as biomass going, keeping it even, relatively even throughout the day.
Yep.
Like you're getting a small intermittent. I've always kind of had this internal battle though, right? Of like, we've mentioned it on the show before. We're trichome farmers.
Right.
And trichomes are thought of as a stress response. Something in my head likes the hand watering system of letting that almost go to wilt, to just like stress it out a little bit. You know what I mean? To try and produce a little more. What's your opinion on that?
So you're pretty much right on the money. When you do the micro feed steering the plant kind of method, it's essentially exactly what you're talking about without getting those potential effects of letting them get to that 5% humidity or 5% moisture content in the actual substrate. I think it's like 10 to 15% is like the lowest you want to go.
Okay.
Where the roots really, again, I'm not a scientist. I'm just that hydro guy. So I just try and retain as much as I can. So I want to say it's 10 to 15% you let it dry back to. And then your next feeding, it gets up to 55 or 60. And then within 2 to 3 hours, it dries back down. So you do get those slight stresses. They're getting fed and then they're drying out. They stress out a little bit, but then right when they're about to stress, you give them that feed and then they absorb it all. Okay. So it's almost more efficient in how the plant eats. You're almost training it from the very beginning. Get it on a set schedule. The plants almost know when to look forward to their next meal in a way.
Yeah.
So a little bit more consistency.
Makes sense, like a bodybuilder.
Right, exactly. So now if you hand watered on a very consistent, which is so hard to do, right? Because life moves so fast. And unless it's your full-time job, if you're a home grower, it's going to be almost impossible to set yourself on a legitimate schedule to go in at, 1, 3, 5, and 7 to just hand water a little bit. Most people do, an every 2 to 3 day big hand water at once.
Yeah, so just a caveat there. I have never been a cocoa guy.
Okay.
So that's that. I've never had the multiple a day type watering. I've always been kind of somewhere in between a soil and a soilless mix.
Okay.
Like it's
like the peat. You throw the peat and the perlite in there.
So I start with a soilless mix, but then I always get a little bit of worm castings, and so that heavies it up a little bit.
Yeah, you're charging it.
And so I don't know. For me, it's like a water every 3 to 4 days when I'm hand watering.
Yep.
But I like the prospect. I did just recently get some blue mats too, which I can't wait to try out.
I was reading a little bit about those. Okay.
They're awesome, dude. They're really interesting to set. You have to like soak them in water first. It's a interesting setup.
So is it like a porous like wick system? Is it natural? I haven't read too much. But.
So they have this. It's a little. They call it a carrot.
Okay.
And the carrot has it's porous. Yeah, it's like a porous sensor on the bottom. And then there's like a plastic top piece that you fill with water, right? And what I think is happening is as the water is draining out and you're losing that, the water has physical properties that like cause it to create a pulling effect when it's draining out and
which pulls oxygen, right?
Exactly. Yep. So in that same event, it's going to pull the moisture from the cap of this carrot, and I think what it does is it pulls a little screw down and opens up the hole for the tube to drip out.
That's pretty cool.
You know what I mean?
That's pretty cool.
It's pretty wild. It's supposed to be able to regulate without you ever having to touch anything, as long as it's calibrated properly.
So I want to almost try this then for my outdoor garden.
Yeah.
I mean, do they have like large ones so you could set up like 50 feeders if you had to?
So the kit that I bought was like $100, and it was 12 for that.
Okay.
I think that you could adjust it to any kind of hose you want, obviously.
So Steve pulled up a picture here. Is it meant for like beds? Do they do like a radius of soil, or is it meant for like a 1 gallon pot, 5 gallon pot? Both. Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
So it depends. They have a table on their website, I believe, that says like the volume of soil to how many carrots you should have in there. So I think if you get into like a 5 gallon pot, you're supposed to use 2.
Makes sense.
And then when you get into beds, obviously
multiples.
More. Yeah.
Makes sense.
It's not. Is it 1 carrot per plant or 1 carrot per
It's like soil area.
Soil area, okay.
Yeah,
Because you got to give enough water for your roots.
So you were just looking up those blue mats, and the Floraflex matrix circulators popped up. Now, depending on how big of a pot you're in, depends most of the time how many feeders or circulators or drippers that you have per plant. So it will change from size to size, just like the blue mats, or just like if you're irrigating, cocoa or something.
Wait, how does Floraflex work? The same type of thing?
So Floraflex has they have a lid that sits on top of your pot, and then they have a little circulator ring, a collar that fits right into that cap that you set over the soil.
Okay.
And so, depending on the size,
it's on a timer though, right?
It's on a timer, and it will vary how long you actually have to water. So if you're in a 2-gallon pot, you do a little 2-inch circulator with a little 9-inch, cap that goes on there. You would water for probably like a minute. Now that little cap that sits on there disperses the water perfectly throughout the whole pot. So you don't end up with any dry spots or hot spots in the soil, which can cause pH fluctuation.
Provided your media is consistent.
Correct.
Like, I just want to throw that caveat so we don't got people out here getting mad at Floraflex because they got crappy soil.
Right. No, so Floraflex actually did just have a problem with their cocoa. So they do cocoa and rock wool. I don't know where they sourced this batch of their cocoa bricks from. It had such a high salt content, it was messing up everybody's EC, or how much food was in the soil or cocoa. And they had to completely shut down for like 6 months until they could clear everything up, find a new batch, source it from somebody or somewhere else, and now it's back to normal.
Yikes!
What would make that happen? What's the process of like making cocoa that would make it have such fucking high salt?
So
where they salt? Go on. Nope.
Cocoa is a waste product, right? It comes obviously coconut shells. I mean, maybe that's not obvious to everybody.
The husk. Yep.
It's the husk of a coconut, and those fibers they should be broken down into uniform sized pieces. But so that happens in a lot of these tropical areas, and for the longest time there was never anything going on with them. So they would just pile these husks up, right? They're just here you go. I mean, it's got to go somewhere. And it was like slowly, like they're breaking down, but not that fast. I mean, you've seen cocoa, right? Like it stays pretty consistent for a while.
Yeah.
And so they have these mounds of coconut husks in these tropical regions that they didn't have anything to do. And now all of a sudden somebody, I'm sure that there's a name that I should know here. Somebody figured out that you could use it for a planting mix. And they were like, oh, okay, let's do that. Like, it's sustainable. But so it's sustainable now. I mean, we don't know. They're currently functioning off of like 50 plus years of mounded cocoa husks that are being used at a very rapid rate at this point. So it could turn out that at some point it becomes unsustainable. I don't know.
And it's only sourced from like 4 or 5 different places or companies. A lot of it comes out of Holland, Sri Lanka, and what's the other big one? I'm trying to think of the other big one, but I'm drawing India. I don't know. There's only a couple places that it really comes from. Same thing with rock wool. Mm-hmm. The companies that can produce insulation, like Owens Corning, for example, they're a huge construction company. They do like roofing materials, shingles, insulation. They have that proprietary system for the insulation for the spun glass. Rock wool is spun rock. So it's like those companies that are doing insulation, they are the ones that actually make the rock wool.
Sense. Yeah, so the variation there is just the fact that they've been sitting for so long that it could have accumulated anything. Sorry, I don't think I actually answered that part of your question.
Well, and then also whoever bags these different cocos, and I mean, there's 50 different brands of cocoa, but again, it's really only coming from 5 places. It's how they wash it or how they treat it before they package it. Sometimes they put in their own wetting agent to keep it moist in the bag.
How clean their machines are that are grinding them up.
Exactly. There's a lot of different variables. How fine the cocoa actually is. Some companies are very fine, and some are like a longer strand. So I make like a real quick reference to people in the store. I go, yeah, if you ever seen chewing tobacco, they got fine cut and long cut.
Yeah.
That's kind of what you get with cocoa. You get one of the two, nothing really in between.
So it's fair to say that all cocoa is not made the same.
Correct.
So what would be the ideal way to make like the perfect batch of cocoa in terms of like how it's washed, how it's processed, and how ground it is?
That's definitely above my pay grade. I don't know if you got something.
So generally, I think Cloud Core is one of the companies that they rinse 3 to 5 times. You want to at least see a company brand, you hope that they're honest in their branding, but market that they at least rinse, 3 to 5 times, low EC content. You want to see, generally what kind of certifications they have. They're RHP certified. Those are the ones you really want to go out for, where some nutrients, OMRI certification, NOFA certification, certain certifications to let you know that these companies are doing things the right way.
Yeah.
And they're not giving you just a crap product in a bag. So RHP certified.
Do you know what that acronym stands for?
I don't. I really don't.
I'll look it up.
Steve will. Yeah, he's good.
That's fine.
I have no clue. So Atami, I believe, is RHP certified. I want to say Mother Earth.
Canna?
So Canna's exclusive with one store here in Rochester, and I'm not them, so I don't have any experience.
Yep.
I don't have any experience with Canna. And props to them for being exclusive with the one store. They are a super fine cocoa.
Okay.
So some people actually don't like that because it packs really tight as you water, and then it reduces the amount of oxygen that gets through to the zone.
You have to add a bunch more perlite.
Right.
I don't know what this is.
What's it saying here?
RH.
That's the exact stamp that they use.
Huh. I'll have to look into it. RHP certified for consumer. RHP certified substrates provided
Rhizosphere
optimal
for healthy
start.
plants.
Yeah, I guess it's probably just like any other certification, international peatland system. It's probably like a lot of these certifications, NOFA cert, everyone's growing organic.
See, I'd actually rather see people using cocoa than peat based, because peat mining is actually pretty bad for the environment, and the levels are like depleting pretty fast, and nobody recycles anything anymore, so it all just ends up getting wasted.
So I agree. A lot of people probably are wasting it, but I don't think that they need to be.
No.
From what I've heard through classes is it's kind of it's pushed, and it's not that it is sustainable, like harvesting peat,
Yep.
but it's not as bad as everybody thinks it is.
Right.
It's really highly managed by the Canadian, I think it's actually the Canadian Sphagnum Peat Moss Association or something like that.
Which most sphagnum peat moss comes from Canada.
Right.
Like Promix, Premier Horticulture, they're out of Canada.
Yep. And so they have a certain percentage that they're allowed to harvest each year, and a certain, which accumulates to like pennies on the dollar, if you will, of what they actually have.
Oh, no, okay.
Supposedly. I obviously, I'm not up there working in the peat bog, so I can't really say whether it is or it's not. I agree with you, though, that we have this other thing that has no use. I mean, there are other uses for peat, right?
Oh, yeah.
They use peat over in Europe a lot for heat, I believe.
Oh, no kidding.
They burn it for something. I'm brain farting so hard on that.
There's got to be something else to do with it other than just like wasting.
Yeah, throwing a bunch of salt on it and then putting it in a compost pile.
Yeah, you're right. Right.
Yeah, I mean, when in doubt, just compost it, right?
Seriously.
Would it be too acidic? Would it make your compost too acidic?
No, I mean, carbon is carbon is carbon. It's going to eventually, if you got to adjust or something, amend before you put it in, you got to amend or put it in.
Do you guys do anything with biochar when you guys do any of your testing or anything like that?
So at my specific people that I work with, no, we don't touch biochar, but I do think that there are people that work with it.
So you might know a little bit more about this than I do. So it works to pull carbon out of the atmosphere, correct? And use it in a right way in the soil, is what somebody tried to explain to me, like biochar, or some people will actually burn stuff to mix the charcoal or the ash right in with their soil, because I heard it was a positive. I heard it pulls carbon from the atmosphere.
I don't have a good answer for you. I actually think that Steve knows a little bit more about biochar than I do, just from his association with. He's got a friend that works with it. But
yeah, so a buddy of mine, his name's Jacob Fox. He runs this really awesome business called Closed Loop Systems.
Okay.
It's out in Geneva. They just opened this sick new facility, and essentially it's organics waste management. And what he does is a lot of vermicomposting, but he actually makes soil. There's the soil that I did my vegetable beds in last week.
Yeah.
And it was like part it was vermicompost and biochar and something else. But it's like this form. The way I wish he was here to talk about it, because the guy is a genius when it comes to this stuff. But it's essentially it's a carbon source for the soil, or he referred to it as the home. Right? You have your nutrients, you have your home, and you have your microbes. I think that biochar was the home.
Yeah, it supposedly gives like a good aeration for your soil,
yep.
and also providing like a porous media for microbes to hang out
and the
in.
Beneficials to hang out. Okay. Yeah, see,
that much I do know.
Somebody was coming in, one of the companies that was trying to sell me their biochar. I remember it was like 4 or 5 years ago when I was at the other store. And I remember him saying something like the carbon in our environment is like a negative carbon. That's a positive carbon, and it helps become like a magnet and take some of that negative carbon and turn it into usable carbon for the soil, if the soil had biochar in it. Could be a total gaffe, but I was just like, it just came to me.
I feel like it's I don't know. It sounds to me like maybe he's trying to draw a picture for you. You know what I mean? Not necessarily
like an analogy.
Yeah.
Because last episode you guys talked a lot about, the carbon and greenhouse effect in the industry. So I was wondering, like, to myself, I remembered that conversation I had with that gentleman, wondering, like, okay, if some of these growers on a large scale started applying biochar just to their soil or their mediums, would it have a more positive effect on the greenhouse gas or the carbon effect in the industry?
I don't know that there's too many people who really can speak to that. I mean, there might be some people who've done some extensive research with biochar, but I don't have a good answer for that.
I don't have an answer, but I have a Wikipedia definition.
Let's go wiki.
Wikipedia says, biochar is charcoal that is produced by pyrolysis of biomass, yet in the absence of oxygen, and is used as a soil ameliorant for both carbon sequestration and soil health benefits. Biochar is a stable solid that is rich in carbon and can endure in soil for thousands of years. So yeah, it does look like it can pull carbon from the atmosphere, which it would be really interesting in the context.
Could be good.
It'd be great for hemp too, because hemp is a carbon sequester too, or CO2. So if
every plant sequesters carbon. I just want to make sure that everybody in the general public knows this. Like, that's literally what's happening when photosynthesis is happening. Like,
hemp does it at a higher rate than other plants though?
Not all other plants, but it does it at a pretty high rate. Yeah, it's pretty. So the faster a plant builds biomass, the faster it's sequestering carbon. So like kelp is one of the fastest growing plants in the world.
I thought it was the fastest.
I think it might be.
I really think you're right. Yeah.
So therefore it's probably the fastest carbon sequestering plant. However, being in the water might change things there. I don't want to be too concrete on that.
Recharge, they got pretty high levels of kelp, and believe me, that makes your plants grow pretty fast.
Honestly, Scotty was the reason that I asked about Canna Coco.
Okay. I'm gonna have to talk to Scott. Dude, bro show. I'm gonna call in and pretend to be somebody I'm not and be like, hey man.
Hi, this is Sandra. I have a question about biochar and kelp.
I'll tell you what though, I can't keep Recharge in stock. Like, I just bought a whole shipment today and probably already sold 6 bags.
Hey man, if it works, it works, right?
Oh my God, it works.
Speaking of that, can you hold me a bag, please?
I ordered you a 5-pound bag just in case.
Yeah, thank you.
Yeah.
So we took a little bit of a hot route.
Let's go back
and finish up Ebb and Flow and Flood and Drain.
Okay.
What does that look like? How does that system work in terms? Let's start with Flood and Drain. How does a system like that work?
The first two that come immediate to mind is either a flood table or flood tray, or they have a system where there's multiple buckets hooked up on the ground, all with tubing, and there's a water source that is on a timer. There's a pump in that 55-gallon drum or the water source that will kick on a schedule. It will fill those buckets up about halfway. And the reason it only fills halfway is there's a little brain with floats that only let it get to a certain level. It will flood the system for about 15 minutes and then drains back into the main water reservoir. Or you have a reservoir sitting underneath a flood table or a flood tray, and same kind of thing. It's on a schedule. Generally, the flood time is 10 to 15 minutes in both systems, and it will flood the tray about halfway up, and then will drain out after about 15 minutes. And depending on the substrate that you're growing in, you're probably going to flood and drain anywhere from, in say a veg setting, 2 to 3 times a day, bloom all the way up to 4 to 6 to 7 if you're in expanded clay pebbles.
And you can reuse. Can you reuse this?
So you can reuse. You do recirculate and reuse, or not recirculate. You reuse that same water. It all goes back to the main reservoir. Probably would change that water out once a week because you're going to have serious pH fluctuation. However, a lot of the salt-based, I don't know about Jax, but I know Floraflex, which is a real cost-effective powder. It's like 4 cents a gallon to mix up in a hydroponic setting. They're almost pH perfect. So you can go almost a full week, say you set your pH to, 5, somewhere between 5.8 and 6.2. It's only going to raise up like 0.1, maybe, up or down. Some nutrients will go from, you set it to 5.8, you go back in 3 days, it's 6.5, and you're like, oh my goodness. That's where like things can go really wrong in that little range. That's why it's so important to be really on your environment, on the pH, monitoring the food levels, no matter what system you're in.
So I recently started playing around with using individual salts and just formulating like my own concentration.
Yeah.
And I've definitely experienced that high pH swing over a couple of days. It went from like, I was at like 5.7 and I went back and it was 6.5. I was like,
yeah, that's a big jump. That's a really big jump, especially if you're dealing with some of these valuable crops that we're talking about here.
Yeah, I always think about it in terms of like a commercial perspective. Like if your business is running a legal cannabis cultivation facility and you're running hydro, how do you are you pHing on a daily basis, or what are you doing on a daily basis to make sure shit does not hit the fan? Because at least with soil, you have a buffer, and right. you're not necessarily growing as quick, and there's pros and cons to everything, but it seems like a lot of things can go wrong in a hydroponic system. Like, if you had like a checklist of things to do to make sure things don't hit the fan.
They have teams of people though. Like, if it's a legitimate business and you're spending all day every day and it's multi-million-dollar business, you have a team of guys that go in and defoliate your plants.
Yep.
You have a team of guys that clean up all those leaves as that guy's throwing them on the ground. You have a team that fills all the reservoirs. You have a team that mixes them, probably checks the levels. Yep. All day, every day.
4 or 5 times a day.
Exactly. And they're using chemicals nowadays, these salt-based nutrients, these dry powders. A lot of them, they're almost pH perfect. They have played around and formulated a ratio to which it doesn't really stray from where you set it. Not much leftover residual in the tanks, which cuts down on cleaning costs, cuts down on your chance to get bad bacteria or pathogens. But yeah, and these facilities are sick. I mean, they've got everything down to an automation, a science. I mean,
even and truthfully, even in soil or soilless mix, you're still going to want to check at least your reservoir daily
and your runoff too.
Yeah, for sure.
Especially if you're having like a pH problem or you see something on the leaves, you're going to put in, and I forget the formula. I'm going to kick myself in the butt for it later. But so you put in, say,
are you trying to talk your to check?
To check the average. So like if you put in a 7.0 water into your soil and it comes out 8.6, there's a way to check it and find out what the hell's going on and how to fix that.
They actually have a standardized test that's a couple different ones actually, just to check your root zone media. One is the 2-to-1, but that's a little invasive. You have to actually pull out like some of the soil from the middle of the pot at least. Yeah.
Oh, okay.
And that's depending on what kind of pot. If you're in plastic pots, you could probably do it, but I personally don't recommend them.
Yeah.
I mean, unless you're in your
fabric.
type of situation. Oh, really? You use fabric?
I actually, when I do all my top feed and cocoa, I do fabric pots.
Okay.
I like the whole self-root pruning.
Yeah.
Not too much root bound. It promotes constant healthy new shoots.
Yeah.
A lot of oxygen to the root zone. And when you're doing the microfeed system like I like to do, the drybacks are so important. That fabric really aids you in those drybacks. Where plastic, unless you're using like, I think they're called air pots, where they're literally, it's a pot made of just dimpled holes. It's barely held together by anything. Unless you're using one of those in a standardized plastic container, you're not getting the amount of oxygen that you need for these plants. So I love the fabric pots.
Yeah, I'm all about fabric pots.
Yeah.
I want to, my only issue with the fabric pots is they're really like, maximum 2 use, right? I mean, you could use them more, but like you're really starting to flirt with issues.
Do you wash them?
I wash them in like a washing machine setting.
Okay.
And like, so I'll go into like a laundromat and I'll do a couple runs of just like water with peroxide in there to clean anything out. And then I just do a super heavy water peroxide solution in one of those laundromats and just...
It's a great idea.
I'll ruin their machines.
Yeah,
you know what I mean?
yeah.
That's a great idea. I was honestly just going to ask if you've heard of radical bags.
No.
Okay, so radical bags, which I heard of also from the DGC.
Do you heat treat them?
No, they're maybe, I don't know, but they're PVC, but they're like woven PVC.
Okay.
So it's like a fabric pot, but washable. Like,
so you could super sterilize those things.
Yeah.
Then. Huh.
Yeah.
No kidding.
I mean, they cost a little bit more than what a fabric pot's going to cost you, but it's...
Yeah, but if it's going to last you
if
longer...
it's reusable, that comes back.
What is it called?
Radical bag. Like
radical
root,
bag.
It's
like a root radical, you know what I mean?
Huh. Okay, so it's about $1 a gallon.
Yep.
Oh, wait,
well, some of them, once you get up into the bigger ones, a lot of times they're running sales on them too. Like if you want to do a bed style.
What is it? Why would that? Is it better than a fabric pot?
Essentially, it sounds like it's the same thing, but
same idea, but
see, but I even like that better.
More reusable.
You're reusing plastic. I mean, if they're all is it recycled products? I don't know. If they were all recycled products using recycled plastic,
You're sequestering plastic.
yes. I'm assuming it's got to be food grade plastic that they start with.
Also, I'm not a rep.
I would assume anything to do
Disclaimer,
with these,
not a rep.
Yeah, anything to do with these crops generally is food grade plastic.
Well, it'd be interesting. I'm sure you could make them out of hemp fiber.
Probably something similar, yeah.
I've been waiting for a hemp-based growing medium.
Yeah, right? Why aren't they using hemp fiber instead of cocoa?
Exactly. So I don't know anybody that's doing it yet, but it's out there. I mean, that's for anybody to capitalize on.
And nobody is really even growing for fiber. And that's like a whole market that's not tapped.
Like the biomass market, that's not, they don't use it for fiber?
It's the extract market. Biomass, when you hear biomass, think hemp, right? That's where people are growing 5, 10, 20 acres and pretty much mulching hanging whole plants, mulching it,
they don't
and throwing it
extracting it.
Throwing in a big ethanol batch, and boom, you got your CBD oil.
Okay.
That's...
And honestly, like, can we talk a little bit bad about that market? Because I swear, I just learned something new, especially locally. There is a company that I won't name that pretty much gives you the seed, fills out your paperwork, like walks you through the whole thing, and then just like bones you in the end. And pretty much you're growing for this company that you like sign away on. And then when you get your product and you bring it to them to, dry it and everything, they charge you X amount of dollars to dry it. Then they run it through this oven that gets up to 480 or some odd crazy degrees and dries it in a matter of minutes, burning off any valuable use of the crop itself.
And probably fucking decarbon the plant too.
I don't really have any problem with you putting this company on blast. I don't know if Steve does.
I think I know who you're talking about. We'll name them off. We'll bitch about them.
Yeah,
off
I'm not gonna do that. I'm not gonna.
All right. That just sounds like plant abuse, right?
It is. I've never met the guy personally. I've met growers from them personally, and a multitude of growers. And it's hard when you get 10, 12 guys that say the same thing about a company that it's not true.
Wasn't your homeboy that was in the store that one day?
Yes, got completely burned by him.
I know exactly what you're talking about.
Lawsuit, the whole nine. And, just real, what this industry shouldn't stand for.
Right.
Right? So, random story. I'm on Instagram the other day. I see a local grower, or another grower, not local, who his plants are falling all over the place. They got too big, too tall, way past his trellis net, and now he's got just these fucking dongs flopping everywhere, right? And so I'm watching his story, and anywhere he cannot find the little yo-yos that hang from the ceiling with the little hooks that hold up your buds to support them. He found a total of a 25 pack, and this guy is growing like a 16 light room. So he needed like hundreds of these yo-yos. I feel like this is the industry where we should just all kind of help one another. I don't even know this guy. I watched his stories. I sent him 200 yo-yos on the cuff from the store, asked him where to send them, and like the dude was so grateful.
Yeah.
That's what I feel like everybody should be doing. Not taking advantage of somebody who wants to do right for their family and then burning them in the end, knowing that that's what they're going into it for.
Well, bro, I think that's how the industry is, right? The real industry people we're a very giving, we're a very empathetic, and we're a very close-knit community.
Absolutely.
The people who got the big pockets and who are coming into this industry because they see dollar signs, they see the green rush, are the people that, really don't know a thing about hemp or cannabis or how to cultivate for medicine. It's how many seeds can I get in the ground and how many acres can I grow and how can I make money off all these different things. People are buying drying units, right? Vulcan dryers, which are like, hey, we'll charge you $10 a pound to come dry your biomass. And people that don't know anything, oh, that's a great idea, so I don't have to hang it. Do you know what you're doing to that plant when you throw it in a multiple 100 degrees dryer? You're destroying it. You might as well just throw your money
even
away.
if you put fans on it.
Yeah.
Like there's a bunch of these processors, I don't whatever, they put fans on. What are you doing? Like, okay, maybe fans making sure there's air movement.
Not on the
but
direct product.
Minimal, not on the product.
No.
That's wild.
60-60. That's what I tell every customer. They ask, how do I cut and hang and dry? 60 degrees, 60% humidity, 10 to 12 to potentially 14 days, depending on how big the plants are. And do it slow. Don't do it fast. You just put all this time and effort. That's what kills me. You just put all this time and effort and energy.
2 weeks.
People will cut 2 weeks early. Just like, I don't know if they get anxious. They don't know any better. Like I try and, 10 weeks at least, 9, 10 weeks, depending on the cultivar, the strain. But most of them are 9, 10 weeks.
I'm a tweaker too.
Yeah.
10 weeker.
Yeah. Yeah. 10 weeker. So I'm a tweaker. So, I mean, you go that long to create such a beautiful product, and then people just destroy it.
Destroy it.
Well, I'll tell you this, and I think that was the biggest thing that I had worked with a couple companies during the growing season last year, and the biggest thing that we ran into was an issue with drying spaces. I can grow 1 acre, I can grow 5 acres. How many acres can I grow? Well, how much space do you have to hold all these plants for 2 weeks at a constant temperature?
Right.
Oh, I have a garage. Okay, sounds like you should grow in a garage-sized space then, because you could grow $1 million of the most textbook perfect crop that you've ever seen. If you fuck up the drying cure, you just wasted a bunch of time and money, and it's going to make you very sad. And I'll tell you this right now. We dealt with the same issue. We grew a 1 acre, 700 plant, right? Some monsters, right? I think you saw them.
They were gorgeous.
They were gorgeous.
I didn't see them in person, but.
And all we had to dry was a 20 by 30 hoop house, right? And we're like, that's all we got to do. You know what we did? We threw a carp thing over it. We had fans going all over the place. We had a heater. We kept that thing within probably 2 to 3 degrees of 60-60. And those plants came out beautiful.
Man.
So the reality is, if you just take some time and get creative and use your resources, you can create a drying facility. Is it going to be perfectly 60-60 if it wasn't in a temp-controlled warehouse? Probably not. But it's better than throwing your plants in a freaking 300-degree oven.
Yeah, for sure. And then even to add on to that, which I don't know if you agree or not, Rob, but
Let's go.
After that dry period, which in my opinion should be at least 10 days, probably closer to 14 and even longer if you can somehow make it go that way.
Yeah.
Even more important is the cure.
Absolutely. So that's the big question, right? Like, okay, we just did all this. Now, how do you store it? I get asked that so many times. There's never like one great answer, especially now because nobody can find mason jars and everybody like knew back in the day to store things in glass, right? They now have like certain bags that are made of certain materials that terpene preservation and all sorts of protection from antimicrobial and all sorts of stuff. Mm-hmm. I don't know if you know, the humidity packs.
Bonfiglio.
They're under some fire right now.
Really?
Didn't know. Okay, so now they just came out with their terpene lock or terpene protection pack because the paper was actually sucking the terpenes from the product. It was keeping the humidity where it was supposed to be. But apparently they use a salt-based solution inside the pack, which is not good for the product to begin with. Integra or Boost is like the company that's like more, I guess you would say it was second to Bovita, but now that Bovita's catching all this heat, there's a whole craze for these Integra Boost packs.
When they start catching this heat, because I thought they have like a challenge out right now where they'll even, they'll send you a pack and like.
It might be because they're under fire.
Okay.
That they're doing this challenge, I would think, probably within the last 2 months. I would say. And it's so random that the distributor I ordered from was out of Bovita, but they had the Integras, and I was like, oh, they do the same thing. I'll just fucking get those. Sure enough, those have been selling out like crazy because nobody wants to buy the Bovitas anymore. Something so simple.
How exactly do they work?
It's like something you would put in a humidor for your cigars just to maintain a perfect humidity.
Yeah.
These ones are two-way humidity. So if it's too dry, brings it back. If it's too wet, brings it down a little bit.
Something about the chemistry inside that pack is like it functions on a moisture gradient, right? Where it specifically wants to be at this gradient. And if the air around it is not that way, it's going to make it that way. That's just that it's chemistry. It's proprietary to
like damp rid, right? People use that little product damp rid for their campers and stuff. It just pulls all the water out of the air and puts it in a little bucket.
So, okay, I actually got asked this question today and I didn't know the answer. If stored properly, how long will cannabis flower last, where it's obviously still intact and still maintains an integrity? And part B of that question is, how much longer will it last if it has one of these humidifying packs to it?
I don't know about the humidity packs. I think how long it lasts is going to be subjective to what you consider it having lasted. Because, like, your cannabis is not going to go bad, right? Like, you're going to have it for years, but it's going to degrade.
As far as a beautiful product, light is probably going to be your ultimate killer. So they've got, whether you store in glass or bags or anything, some people just use turkey bags.
Right.
But those are completely translucent. So the light gets to them. And I guess if it's not stored properly, it may darken over time. But like Justin said, it might degrade a little bit, but it's still going to do the trick. No, obviously, if you.
I think the research is probably still out as far as like specifics of how long it takes for cannabinoids to degrade. I'm sure there's some preliminary research out there, but like I personally haven't seen anything that says like, oh, after X amount of time you like or THC's half-life is this. You know what I mean? Yeah. Like I don't.
Well, they've got infinity jars, which is a certain type of glass. It's more of a darker brown, but it keeps out UV rays and UV light. Yeah. So like they're kind of pricey, but it's supposed to, technically you're supposed to be able to have your product in there for well over a year without it changing color. What was the other one? So that was infinity jars. They had a test like with beer. So you'd almost assume the glass would have a lot to do with it. They did that with beers to see like how the different color glass had effect, green, brown, white, or clear. I would assume the light, temperature, everything kind of has to play a factor.
Yeah.
Environment is
oxygen, light, temperature, anything that is going to cause them to break down, which is pretty much temperature, oxygen, and light are the three culprits there. However, like you still can, it's going to depend. Did you cure that perfectly, right? Because if you have a little bit of excess moisture in there, it could lead to like a fungal growth inside. And really, if you're trying to prolong that storage, you need to not open the jar. So you need to get it to perfect and then leave it till you're going to use it.
So you wouldn't recommend burping?
Burping through the cure.
Okay.
And then once you're there, sealed.
I wanted to clarify.
Yeah, because every time oxygen enters there, it's going to start working on those trichomes. Something I like to recommend as like a handicap though, as far as curing goes, you can get like these teeny little humidistats.
Yeah.
And if you get the circular one, it just makes it easier for yourself. You can get a hole saw and drill a little hole in the lid of your mason jar, silicone that thing right in there, you don't have to worry about anything. You know what I mean? That's a quick
customer
DIY.
That makes one. We have a customer that makes one. He literally like just gives me the lids to give to people at the store. So I probably have like 4 or 5. Anybody wants one, stop in. They're yours.
Stop in.
So we're coming up on time.
Yep.
This has been an awesome, enlightening conversation. I want to do 2 things. First thing, we're going to do a giveaway.
We're going to do a pulse giveaway.
What the fuck is that?
So that plays into everything we've been speaking on. Environment, right? Environment is everything to do with this industry from, Pulse 1. Where's the camera? There we go. All right. So
I'll hold it while you...
Yeah. So essentially, it tracks your VPD, variable pressure deficit, which is that perfect, like, symbiotic relationship of temperature, humidity, light, and CO2. This specific one doesn't tell you your CO2, but it gives you your exact VPD. It charts it every single day. It sends alerts to your phone. You can go through, you can name it, Justin's Grow. You can set your own parameters. If you want your daylight temps to be 75, it will tell you within a tenth if it's out of that parameter that you want. Temperature, humidity, your light.
That's what I was going to ask. So if you had a timer mess up and that comes on in the middle of the night, it alerts you, right?
Yes. So it alerted me. I did a post the other day, and I think you even commented on it. It alerted me that my lighting was off by like a tenth of a percentage. Like just a fraction.
Love that.
Like that's almost as if like a bee or something flew in front of the light and it was like quick difference, and it was like boom, it sends you an email right away. You can pay to have it sent text messages to your phone, but check your email. These retail for like $189. So however you guys want to go about giving it away, it's going to be super valuable for a grower that can appreciate tracking their VPD.
Yeah.
Dude, I got one.
These are a must-have, I feel like.
I have one. I've never slept so good. You know what I mean? Like, it just like, so it doesn't control anything, but it just ensures, you can just pull it up and have that little like, feel safe. Like, okay, today at 6 o'clock it was this, and at 7 it was this, and it didn't change. My VPD's on target.
The beautiful thing too is these days you can have your email notify you on your phone just like a text message.
Exactly.
So you don't even really need to worry about that.
And this has like push notification settings that hooks right up to your email. They're pretty sick.
This is a win, guys. And I just want to tell you that Rob kind of told us that if we wanted to, we could maybe sequester this thing or try to get in on the getaway. We're not going to do that.
No?
Speak for yourself.
No, I totally wanted you guys to be able to get in on it. If you don't want to, because you don't want there to be like any, flack from it, that's fine.
Imagine drawing live on air and one of us won. Be like, yeah, that's going back in the bucket. That's not a good look.
I guess that wouldn't look too good. But okay, so exclude yourselves. Just make sure, like, right, people would follow your Instagram page.
Yep.
Tag, you guys could go through and.
Yeah, we'll announce exactly how we're gonna do it. I think it's gonna look like on Instagram, tag Cannabis Cum Laude, tag #Hydro, and tag 2 friends. And if you want to, please subscribe to the podcast. That would be huge.
Absolutely.
We will be doing more giveaways. We also have something exciting that we won't announce just now, but a collaboration with Rob and his company, #Hydro.
Yes.
So keep an eye out for that giveaway. That's going to be dope. This is a high dollar item. It's essential. It says essential on the box, so it must be essential. And the last thing that I wanted to do is, I don't know if everyone's been following the news. It looks like we are going to get home grow. I guess
6 plants?
We don't know.
Okay.
Right. But it
12.
seems in the midst of all this stuff going on with the governor, from the nursing home stuff to the sexual allegations, that his arm has been turned.
He's got no leg to stand on.
And it looks like we are going to get home grow. What exactly that looks like, I don't know. But the MRTA was slated for 6 plants, which would be awesome. It'd be better if we had 6 in veg, 6 in flower, and
cross multiple people in a household.
Yes.
Yeah. So if you could have 12 per household, even 6 in veg, 6 in
that's a lot. That you could.
I would turn my garage into a lab.
Yeah.
You can't let them know that.
No, I would get a license. I would do it the right way. Whatever the parameters or hoops I have to jump through, I guess I would do so.
So here's what I'm nervous about. I'm nervous it's a bunch of hype and it's going to end up being only medical patients and only autoflower seeds or something silly like that.
I think it is going to be medical only.
That I would go. I am very much against the medical companies and everything they stand for, but I would go get my medical card if I was allowed, if that was for me to home grow. I think it's kind of bullshit, and I think it's another money grab, but the reality is if that's where we meet in the middle, sure.
I don't like the forfeiture of pistol permit or guns. I think that's a load of bullshit. And there was a state that just voted like 46-0 against that, and they just won. So I forget exactly which state. It was really recent in the news. They voted that you don't get your gun taken away if you're a medical card holder or if you're a cultivator.
It shouldn't.
It shouldn't.
There's not a prayer here, bro.
No, I mean, dude.
There's not a prayer here.
No, so if it comes to that, I mean, I'm not going to give up my Second Amendment right just to grow cannabis. I'll just do it anyways.
Well, it's like if I get prescribed something from the doctor, I don't have to give it up. Why would this be any different?
Right. Dude,
I don't even want to.
I know.
I don't even want to get
That's a whole other hour-long show.
Yeah. So where I was getting at with home grow is, since we are very much home grow focused, and today we talked about hydroponics, and you did say that top feed was your favorite system.
Yes.
Let's pretend that we get a bill signed that has a 6-plant limit.
I have packages.
What would be an economical? What do you need to set up a top feed hydroponic system for a home grower, for a 6-plant system?
So that goes into many variables. I'll try and keep it like as plain Jane as possible. You're going to need a table, a reservoir. You're going to need to make your own environment. As far as money goes, we can go all different tiers. We can get you in as cheap as $400 or $500 to grow 6 plants. I mean, that's probably can get even a little cheaper than that if you can, come up with some things on your own. But you can go as low as, say, $400 or $500 all the way up to the top tier of you can put 10 grand in a 6-plant room. I mean, you literally, as far as equipment, you can build these rooms as nasty as you want.
You might even be able to get higher than that.
Yeah, and I'm actually currently working with putting a team of guys together to offer full build-outs for rooms if it goes that way, and if people want, a grow coach. We'll be there. We'll have the team set up, like you guys involved. And we're getting ready to put some cool stuff together. I'm also going to raffle off a bunch of stuff for 420. Hopefully we'll have an answer by then. You might be able to win your very own 6-plant setup. We're going to have some cool raffles coming up at the store.
Yes. And it would be awesome because if we get home grow, we could actually do an episode on site and look at the plants and do plant diagnostics, and it'd be fucking rad.
Do a show at the store, man.
Yes.
Yeah. I'd like to do like a setting up a grow if somehow we don't get this home grow and can't do plants in there, even just setting it up to show how setting up those systems.
I'm totally
awesome.
game.
Yeah.
I mean, I could even put together a whole material list for anybody, different packages, different sizes, all sorts of layouts.
Yeah, maybe that would be cool. Maybe we can collaborate on a 1-pager of your basics equipment and send it to our audience. And if they want more information, they can reach out to the Hydro guy.
Yeah, call 488-GROW.
I love it. Thank you so much for coming on the episode.
Thank you guys, seriously. This was awesome.
You guys are wizards. I appreciate sitting here listening to you guys. That's another episode of Cannabis Cum Laude. Today was Hydroponics. Our guest, Ron Bonfiglio of #Hydro Inc. And hopefully the next time we talk to you, we'll be one step closer to legalization in New York.
Absolutely.
See ya.
Thanks to our friends here at Rockbox Recording and Production in Rochester, New York. They are a full professional podcast and video studio designed by a radio guy for podcasters. Audio, video, voiceovers, editing, whatever. Mouth off at rockbox.com.
You can follow Cannabis Cum Laude on LinkedIn, Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, and Cannabuzz. Type Cannabis Cum Laude into your search bar and you should be able to find us, but the links will also be posted in the episode notes as well. If you want to help support the show, head on over to Patreon, and that will ensure that we're able to keep the best quality sound and video coming to you on a regular basis. And if you liked what you heard today, please don't forget to rate and review the show.